Thousands of years ago in a far-off land, there was a powerful empire called Ancient Egypt. It was the longest-lasting civilization in history and is arguably one of the most influential. But where exactly was this great empire located? What can we find out about it, and how did it affect us? You're about to find out. This is Ancient Egypt. Number 1. Geography. Nile River. Egypt is located on the northeast corner of Africa, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. The majority of Egypt is desert, with very little rainfall and large temperature fluctuations between summer and winter. While today the country is mostly desert, it was once very green. There are actually some places in Egypt where there are still palm trees. This means that ancient Egyptians didn't necessarily live in an endless sea of sand. However, if they weren't living in a rainforest, then where were they living? Well, the key to survival in the Egyptian desert was the Nile River. Not only did it provide water for crops and animals, but it also provided fertile land to farm on. In fact, 95% of the population lived near the Nile because that's where the food was. The river would overflow every year, depositing silt that made the soil incredibly fertile. Farming villages popped up all over the place. And when people started settling down, they would eventually form the first Egyptian cities. In short, the Nile wasn't just a river, it was life itself. No, 2 pharaohs and pyramids. Now that we know where ancient Egyptians lived, let's talk about who they had as their leaders. Ancient Egyptians had a powerful leader known as the pharaoh. The pharaoh was considered both the head of the religious and political system. He owned everything in the kingdom and was responsible for keeping the people happy. He was also considered a god, which gave him even more power. So basically, if you didn't like the way the pharaoh was running the country, you couldn't go to the pharaoh and tell him how he was doing things wrong. That would be considered blasphemy. Instead, you would have to convince the gods to take the pharaoh's power away from him. One of the most famous pharaohs was King Tut, who took the throne at age 9 and died at age 19. But there was also Akhenaten, who ruled from 1353 to 1336 BC, and is now known as one of the most controversial figures in human history. His obsession with the sun god Aten caused him to neglect other gods, and even changed the Egyptian capital to a new city called Amarna. But not all pharaohs were so different. Ramesses II is considered one of the greatest warriors in Egyptian history, and he ruled from 1279 to 1213 BC during his reign. The Egyptian Empire reached its largest size ever. Under his rule, Egypt controlled Palestine, Lebanon, Nubia, the Sinai Peninsula, and Libya. When he died, his son, the warrior pharaoh, Merneptah, inherited the throne. Merneptah would go on to start a war with the Hittites, but after his death, Egypt entered into a period of decline. While Egypt may have started out as a small collection of farming villages along the Nile, it grew to become one of the most powerful empires in history. However, many of the villages and towns that we associated with ancient Egyptians today are no longer there. Many were destroyed by wars or natural disasters, but others were simply lost to time as the river shifted and changed course. 3. Egyptian gods and afterlife. Ancient Egyptians believed in many gods, including gods of the sky, earth, sea, light, and darkness. They also believed in gods that represented everyday items, such as magic, wisdom, and music. Some of the most popular Egyptian gods included Ra, the sun god, Osiris, the god of the dead, Horus, the sky god, Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the afterlife, Bastet, the cat goddess of protection, and Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom. The Egyptians worshipped these gods through building temples and making offerings to them. They also believed that the gods could take on human form, and so they often built statues of the gods in order to communicate with them. The Egyptians believed that the afterlife was a place where the soul could live forever. They believed that when someone died, their soul would travel to the underworld, where it would be judged by Osiris. If the soul was pure, it would be allowed to enter the field of reeds, a paradise where it could live in peace and happiness. However, if the soul was impure, it would be sent to the house of the forever, where it would suffer for eternity. To ensure that their soul would be pure, the Egyptians practiced a number of rituals and ceremonies, including mummification. Mummification was the process of preserving a body after death. This was done in order to prevent the body from decaying and to keep it in good condition for the journey to the afterlife. The process began with removing the internal organs from the body, followed by washing the body in spices and herbs. The body was then wrapped in bandages and placed in a coffin. One of the most important parts of mummification was the preservation of the brain. The brain was removed through the nose and then treated with a special concoction of resin and cloth. It was then replaced in the skull. After the body had been completely wrapped, it was placed in a tomb, often with a number of grave goods. Grave goods were items that were placed in the tomb with the deceased person. These items were intended to provide for the deceased person's needs in the afterlife. Some common grave goods included food, clothing, jewelry, and furniture. In addition to the material possessions, the Egyptians also placed a number of funerary texts in the tomb. These texts were intended to help guide the deceased person through the underworld and to ensure that they were judged favorably by Osiris. Number 4. Daily life of Egyptians. Ancient Egypt was home to a variety of different people, from wealthy landowners to poor farmers. The average Egyptian worked as a farmer and spent their days tending to crops and livestock. They also traded goods and services with other Egyptians. Most Egyptians were polytheists, meaning they believed in more than one god. They worshipped a variety of gods and goddesses, each of whom had their own unique powers and domains. Religion played an important role in daily life for ancient Egyptians. They built huge temples to honor their gods and goddesses and held festivals in their honor. Art was an important part of life in ancient Egypt. Artists created paintings, sculptures, and other works of art that depicted scenes from daily life, as well as scenes from Egyptian mythology. One of the most famous examples of Egyptian art is the pyramids that were built as tombs for pharaohs. While ancient Egypt was largely polytheistic, there were also some Jews and Christians living in the empire. Jews were mostly traders who had come from the Middle East, while Christians were converts to the new religion of Christianity. Both groups faced persecution from the Egyptian authorities, however, and were often forced to live in secret. And 5. Hieroglyphs and inventions. Writing was an important part of life in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians developed a system of writing called hieroglyphics, which used pictures and symbols to represent words and sounds. Hieroglyphics were used to record everything from official government documents to personal letters. Egyptians also kept detailed records of their agricultural activities, as well as their trade transactions. They invented the solar calendar, which is still used today. They also invented the concept of zero and developed a system of mathematics that was used throughout the ancient world. Ancient Egyptians kept domestic animals such as cows, sheep, and goats. They also kept pets, such as cats and dogs. The Egyptians used animals for a variety of purposes, including as a source of food, labor, and transportation. They also kept animals as pets and as companions. They were also known for their advanced medical knowledge, and their skilled physicians were in high demand throughout the ancient world. They developed treatments for a variety of illnesses and injuries, and they were also skilled surgeons. Overall, ancient Egypt was a complex and advanced civilization that made significant contributions to human history. Its people developed sophisticated systems of government, law, and religion, as well as advancements in science, technology, and art. Their legacy continues to influence the world today. Now it's time for you to tell me, what was your favorite thing about ancient Egypt? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about this amazing place, check out the resources in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.